Alright guys, hi and welcome back once again to our little Maya course. This time it is Maya 103 with the rigging basics. Rigging is a very complex topic, so we are only covering the very first steps essentially over the course of this video and the course. And there will be much to follow in the future. But this time around I'm only going to explain what rigging is, what it is about, what you have to consider when rigging a character. Also, I changed the quality of the recording, and I hope this time around you don't have to count the pixels on your screen, because hopefully this time it really is full HD and not some downsampled version of it. Okay, let's get started. So, for all of you that don't know, what is rigging? Well, if you have a character like this guy, who I sure you remember him, and you want to move him, you want to place him in a game or something, or you want to make an animated movie with him, but you only have the model and maybe the textures, and you want to make him move, make him dance, whatever. And you have no idea how to do that. Well, to answer that question, how we can move this character, we shall now take a look at how a real person moves, which is, of course, by bones and muscles. And while there are several methods in CG and 3D to actually simulate bones and muscles that you, especially for photorealistic projects, which really have to look naturalistic. This is very common to use these techniques, but don't you worry, we're not going to do that today because it is very complex. Instead, we will be focusing on something which is called a joint. Essentially, those are two joints at the moment. I'm going to explain that later. But a joint is, a bone inside of Maya. And with this bone, we will build up a skeleton for our character, which might look like this. Alright, there's just only one problem, because the bones, of course, are inside of the character, and we want to control that character. We want us or some other person to have that character animated. In a large studio, you of course have the riggers, the rigging department, which only focuses on building up the skeleton, and then you have the animation department, which only focuses on moving the character, animating the character. And well, at the moment it's not very friendly for animators to do that, because you only have the bones, which are inside the character, and when you're animating or moving a character, you of course want to see him do that and not only see the skeleton. So there's some simple thing we need to add, which are controls. And with these controls, the character can be controlled, as the name suggests. And these controls control the skeleton, which thus control the character. Okay, so now we have the skeleton and the controls, but there's one thing left, which is where the bones are just not connected to the character, right? And we will not be doing that today. That's something for a later topic. But the theory is that each vertex gets a bone, or each bone gets a number of vertices, which are assigned to that bone, and when the bone moves, these vertices move as well. So when we add a character, the foot vertices are connected to the foot bone or joint, and therefore when the joint is moved through the control of the foot, the vertices of the foot move as well. But as I said, we'll not be covering this today, but it's of course important for you to know that this is the theory of it. Okay, let's jump right into Maya, because there's a bit of theory that is needed to explain first, because well, as I said, it's a very complex topic and there are a few things that you need to consider before rigging your character. The first thing is, well, we have two cubes here, as you can see, cube 1 and cube 2. And, oops, here we go. And if you have not done so, please activate the outliner. The outliner, you can also find that in Windows Outliner. Here we go. When we click on that, of course, mine is already activated, which is sort of an index of your Maya scene. So we have the perspective camera. We also have the top camera. We can activate it by dragging it to the window. Neat little trick for you. Front also, side. But we're gonna go for the perspective view. We also have a person, which will come in use later. There we go. But for now, we are going to focus on the two cubes, which are here. As you can see, those cubes have coordinates. Cube 1 has a coordinate of 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, because it's right at the origin of your Maya scene. And we have a cube 2, which is a little bit shifted in the x-axis. So we have minus 3.259, and all the other values, of course, still are 0, because it only has been translated to the left here. Well, these two cubes at the moment stand on their own. And when you build up a skeleton, parenting and child objects, or parent or child objects, are very, very important. Because, of course, when you want to, let's say, move the shoulder of the character, the arm needs to move with it. Or when you move the hand, all the fingers need to move with it. So this is a little bit of parenting and child objects 101. So if we have cube 2 and we parent that cube to cube 1, we can do so by first pressing the 1 cube, which we want to parent to another object, and then we select the parent object, which in this case is cube 1, and we press shift while doing so. So the last selected object always gets a green outline, and the other objects, which can be several, but in this case it's just one, has a white outline. And then we press P, and you can already see that inside the outliner we now have only cube 1 and a little plus. And when we click on that little plus, we can open it and see that cube 2 is now a child of cube 1. It sort of is derived from cube 1. Yeah, and if we now press cube 1, you can see that both cubes are selected, because, of course, as you can see in the outliner, if we select only that, if we deselect that plus, you can see that, of course, we select both objects. And if we select only cube 2, only cube 2 is selected. It's very basic. I'm pretty sure you have understood it by now. But the important thing is that the coordinate space of that cube number 2, that child cube, is now changed, because cube 1 still is, well, in this 0 space, of course, inside the world space. World space is, of course, the viewport of Maya. Like when no object is there, when the object has coordinates, it's inside that 3D coordinate system, which is the 3D viewport. But cube 2 is now not inside of the Maya viewport. Well, it is, of course, but it's not inside the viewport space, thus the world space. But the space is now, or it is now inside of the space of cube 1. which means that if I rotate cube 1, for example, like this, and of course cube 2 moves with it, let's do some sort of weird angle like this, and we can see that cube 2 has now the same coordinates. They didn't change because we didn't move cube 2, we only moved cube 1. And yeah, so the space of cube 2 didn't change. It is sort of relative to cube 1 and dependent on it. So if we move that back, of course, we can zero that out. It still has the same coordinates. But of course, when we move this cube and only cube 2, it changes. This is very important for you to know that when a child object, when an object is a child of another object, the space that it lives in is not the space that all the other objects in that scene live in, but relative object space to that other object that it is parented to. Some other neat little tricks for you if you want to step up your shortcut game. We can, of course, revert that parenting process by clicking on both objects. It doesn't matter which one you click first, and then press Shift P, and then of course those two are separated from each other again. And you can, if you only want to, well, control your scene visually, so to speak, from the outliner, you can simply drag and drop cube 2 by pressing your middle mouse button to or onto cube 1, and now it is also selected. And we of course can do that. We can remove that object from that childhood by pressing the middle mouse button again and dragging it out of that space of cube 1. All right, so this is the very basics, which is very important when it comes to controls later on, but also for the skeleton, which we are now going to build. Well, I just simply hide cube 1 and cube 2 and unhide person 1, and I'm going to switch to the front view. Again, now the wireframe is selected. We can also press 5 for the shaded view. 6, which doesn't change, is the textured view, but because that model doesn't have any textures, it only shows in the shaded view as well. But we are going to press 4 for now, because we now want to go basically inside of that object and add some bones to it. We can do so by clicking on that shelf here, which says rigging. But if that is too easy for you, you can also go to the rigging tab, which is right here, and go to skeleton and create joint. But for the other guys, inside that rigging tab, there's pretty much all you need. And we're going to select the second one right here, which is the joint, and don't click anything else, because now the joint selection or the joint creation is active. And we basically can click anywhere to create the skeleton. Now, of course, the question is, where do we start? And well, as I said, we need to start basically where the origin of that object is, because when we start at the hand, all the movement starts where the hand is, because we are basically creating the parent object at first. So I'm going to go ahead and select the center point of our character, which is of course the hip. And as you can see, we have created a joint. And I just go ahead and create the very first arm for him. I don't know, the shoulder bone, and then sort of an elbow, hand control, and maybe a finger control as well. By pressing W, you can get out of that selection. Alright, if we now hide that person, we can see that we have created a joint chain. How it is called. That's how it's called. That joint chain is of course now, well, we can select this joint right here and everything moves because we created that one first. That one is the parent, and every joint that created afterwards is a parent of the following joint. So if we select only the shoulder part right here, you can only move that. Same for the elbow, etc. It all makes sense really, and we can see that what we have done by well, looking inside of the outliner and seeing we have created joint 1, and if we click on that, we can see that joint 2 comes afterwards. Well, we can of course open up everything by clicking on a little plus, but we can also press Shift and then on that plus, and then everything, okay, just one left, then everything will open, and you can see basically the same the whole structure. So we can press Shift again, click on the little plus, and everything will show which is in that hierarchy. But if we now want to create the leg, for example, we can press on the little joint button again and click on that parent hip joint, and then that one gets selected and is now the parent of the next joint that we are going to be creating. So I can just create the joints for the rest of the leg, and as you can see, another joint chain has been created. I hide that person again, and we can see down here, if we select that, this one is still a child from joint 1, which is, well, visible through that little line. And yeah, the same thing if we want to move that one, or joint 1, everything moves, but of course we can just move the leg or the knee part, whatever. It all works. Alright, so much for the theory. The character, of course, adds a few other things that are important to him. For example, another arm and another leg, and there are a few options which we can do. For example, if you go to skeleton, which is on the top here, you can say mirror joints, and we want to mirror on the XY axis. Press apply, and then it has been mirrored. And because we haven't been so precise, it has now been mirrored. That's true, but all the joints are duplicated, whatever. So now we basically have to rebuild our structure. No, Siri, not you. We basically have to rebuild our structure on the spine, and we'll have to delete all the things on the duplicate spine. Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and click. As you can see, his 2 joint chains now have been created, and I'm now going to select only the arm. Press Shift P, and then we only have the arm separated, and then I'm going to select the right leg. Shift P, and then that one is deselected as well. And then I'm just deleting the well, spine, which we don't need, the separate spine. Alright, and then I can select this one and this one, press P, and okay, well, maybe I'm going to delete that one as well, the duplicate. Okay, select that one, press P, and now everything is derived from joint 1 again. And we have a functioning skeleton with all the arms. But what is if you decide to, well, change things later on? Because if we now activate the person right here, press 5, we can see that the joints are not really inside of that person as a bone should be. Well, there's a simple solution for this. We can move them, but which is very important, you are not allowed to rotate them. You are only allowed to move them, because when you rotate them, that could be a problem later on, or it could very much lead to problems, especially when you want to reorient the joints, which we will discover later on. Okay, so I'm going to start at the shoulder and just move that back. Also the elbow, of course, and I want to move the hand joints as well. And here we go, that arm is finished. And speaking of the orientation, which I mentioned earlier, well, you cannot really see it at the moment, so I'm just hiding that person and move that a little bit further, maybe like this. And we are just going to assume that the model is very weirdly modeled and the arm bends like this. So let's imagine you want to move that arm when the model is finished, of course, when the rig is finished, of course. You want to well, rotate that arm to animate the character. And you press, of course, E for rotation, or you select rotation here. And you can now see that the arm is basically, well, not aligned to the rotation axis. So if we want to, if you would want to move that arm, we would have to do a bit of, I don't know, this, which of course isn't very smooth and not very well designed as a rig. And this problem, of course, occurs everywhere where you have moved the joints later on. Also in this instance, for example, also you cannot really see it, maybe a bit, that the axes are off. So what we would want to do in this case is select all the joints and go to skeleton and click on orient joints. And now, as you can see, the axes do align. And all is well. There's one other thing I would like you to do, which is renaming the joints so that it makes sense. For example, joint 1, we can call that hip. This one is, I don't know, spine joint. I cannot type. Spine joint 1. This one is spine joint 2, I don't know. Alright, which just makes it easier, especially when you are working with very large rig. And yeah, I want you to rename all those joints. And one other thing that we can do is adding controls already, which is well, a little bit more complicated than it might seem. You can create a control or a curve, which is mostly used for rig controls. If you go to that shelf and go to curves, which is at the front, and press, for example, or click on the NURBS circle, which creates a circle. And that circle is at the moment zeroed out. And thing is, if we move that to the joint we want to control, for example this one, there are of course some values. But, well, it doesn't seem like such a big problem for you, I guess. But when you are an animator and you animate your object or your character, you would like to have all the NURBS zeroed out at any point when they are some sort of in the idle states, because sometimes you want to reset your character, or you may have messed something up and you want to basically have the character at the default state, and what you will then do is zero all the values. But if you do so here, suddenly the upper right hip would be at the bottom, and pretty much all the joints in this scenario would be at the very origin of your Maya scene, which we certainly do not want. But there's a neat little trick that we will use, which is very common in the industry, don't you worry. It's the technique which is used most of the time, and that is by adding a group on top of your or as a parent of your NURBS, of your NURBS circle. We can do that by selecting the NURBS circle, which has now zeroed out values, and pressing Command or Control G, which creates a group right on top of it. As you can see here, we have a group and we have the NURBS circle, and we can of course move the group to any location we would want. By the way, V does snap to a vertex or a joint. So if you press V and then this little circle, we can go to any joint that we want to control. For example, that hip or that knee control right here. And we can even scale it, because I think the the leg is pretty wide. You can just scale it. And if we take a look at our control, it has still zero values because it is a child of that group, and we only moved the group, which of course has some values. But we could now move that one if it would be connected to a joint, and well, it would work. So I don't know if that's too much, but I'm going to show it anyway, because you will have already plenty to do with only creating the skeleton, of course. But if you would like to connect that NURBS circle to your knee, you would have to do, well, there are several techniques. I'm going to show you the easiest, and later on in the next lecture or something, I'm going to show you some advanced techniques that you can use to make it more professional. But the easiest technique is to just make your NURBS circle a part of your skeleton by parenting. So we would like to have that knee control right here. We want that group of the NURBS circle to be a child of that knee. We can do so, of course, by pressing on the group, not the circle, the group, and also clicking on the knee afterwards, pressing P, and then your group, and your control group has been a part of your skeleton or of your object. And if we now rotate that, nothing happens. Why is that so? Well, because although it is derived from joint 11, which appears to be the knee joint, I should have named that. Here we go. It is now only connected to that one, and if I move, of course, the child, nothing happens to the other objects in the scene. What we of course want to do is select everything which is below that knee joint, joint 12 and 13, and parent them to our NURBS circle. And then, if we select that one, we can see that it moves. It is not connected to your character, of course, so only the skeleton moves. And also what you can see is that our nice bone structure has been completely destroyed. Because there's one thing you need to know. The little sphere that you can see, that is the joint, and only the joint. And this one is a joint as well, and this little rectangular thing only is a visual. Well, it's only a way from Maya to you to have you see how the parenting connection is. And sometimes there are bugs and this parenting connection does not appear at all, but also you can do it on purpose by parenting something else between your bones, like we did at the moment with this NURB circle. And it is still there, the connection is still there, but the neat little, well, a visual rectangular object to have you see how the parental construction is no longer there. But we can now, of course, select that NURB circle and it moves, and we can select every value, zero it out, and it will be right here again, zeroed out and in the default state. All right, and we can also see that its transform has been created. And we can just leave it as it is, because if we now would like to select that joint and put it over the transform, you can see another transform gets created automatically from Maya, because there's no other way from Maya to do it. So just ignore that transform, and this structure right here would be the correct structure for beginners to implement controls into your joint rig. But of course, as you can see, it can get a little bit confusing at times, and this is why there are easier methods, or not easier, but more complex methods which sort of sustain the overall structure of your skeleton. But for now, this works fine, and I would like you to do that. All right, this has been it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.